In the West, folks say the wind never stops, but sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stop, and even the dust will settle. That night, the wind tore through the town of Dry Willow, carrying the cold breath of the Flint Hills with it. Wooden signs creaked. Spur nails on boots clicked sharp against the dirt road. Under the lone yellow lantern, Caleb Ward, a skinny young man barely past 20, dragged his worn boots down the empty street, focused on just one thing: keep moving, deliver the horses before sundown. But at the edge of town, where the road split into two, he stopped. Through the haze of dust, an old woman with silver hair stood alone, turning slowly as if she had wandered into someone else's dream. People passed her by, a stagecoach driver, a merchant, even the deputy. Each glanced, then looked away. Only she remained, clutching a faded cloth bag, whispering into the wind. The children are waiting. I need to get to the school before class starts. Caleb squinted toward his horse, toward the dropping sun behind the red stone ridge. He knew the truth. If he stopped, he'd lose the job, lose the money, lose the bed he was counting on tonight. But then he saw it. The fear in her eyes. Not fear of the dark, but fear of being forgotten. And in that fleeting moment, he understood. There are paths that don't lead home, yet still deserve someone willing to walk them all the way. The Arizona sun set slow, like a cooling ember in a blacksmith's forge. Evening light stretched across the wooden storefronts of Dry Willow, a town where dust and wind were the only things that never ran out. Every day was the same. Red dust at sunrise, scorching dryness at noon, and by dusk the whole town seemed to hold its breath in that copper-colored light. Along the main street, a few silhouettes lingered. A stable hand brushing dirt off his boots. The saloon girl sweeping old pine boards. Two kids arguing over a tarnished nickel. Across the road, the windmill turned with a rough, grinding screech, as if reminding everyone that in this place, nothing lasted forever. Caleb Ward stood outside the Boone Horse stable, his canvas coat coated in dust and sweat. He was only 20, yet his face already carried the look of someone who had traveled more than he had lived. His gray eyes seemed older than the rest of him, tired and deep, as if they had seen too much too soon. His father had been a roaming hunter for hire, gone before Caleb turned 8. His mother, gentle as dry grass, died during a fever season. Caleb grew up under temporary roofs, cattle sheds, mining camps, half-built saloons. Where there was work, he stayed. When the work dried up, so did his welcome. Silas Boone, the stable owner, was rough but fair. A big man with a gray beard, always chewing dry tobacco and speaking like every word cost money. He gave Caleb a place to sleep in the loft, a spot at the workers' table, and paid him little, but he paid honestly. In Dry Willow, that was enough to earn gratitude. That afternoon, as Caleb scrubbed out a watering trough, Silas walked over and said in his clipped, gravelly voice, "McLean Ranch needs a breeding mare. You take her over before sundown. 3 coins. You're late. You're unpaid." Caleb wiped his hands on his trousers and nodded once. 3 silver coins, small to most people, but to him, they meant a week of meals and a roof over his head. Enough to finally pay off the tab he owed at the boarding house. Silas studied him for a moment, then added quietly, "Don't stop along the road, Ward. The wind out there doesn't care who you are." Caleb didn't respond. He only tightened the mare's lead rope and glanced toward the sunset, falling fast like a final curtain. On his way back to the stable, he looked across the town. From the Red Lantern Saloon, a banjo twanged over hoarse laughter. At the church steps, The old pastor hammered a new sign into place. Sunday sermon, why people don't stop. The words made Caleb huff a dry half-laugh, but something in his chest tightened. It wasn't that he didn't want to stop. Life just never gave him the luxury. He passed the general store. 2 boys were throwing stones at a stray dog. Caleb nearly stepped toward them, then stopped himself. Not because he didn't care, but because every time he got involved, it cost him something. A job, a place to sleep, someone's trust. Out here, kindness didn't feed your stomach. Work, money, survival. Those were the 3 ropes that tied him to this world. But there was one thinner thread, buried deep, tougher than the rest. His mother's voice from the night she died. Fingers wrapped around his small hand. Don't let your heart turn to stone, Caleb. Sometimes one stone that refuses to move stops the whole storm. He never forgot. Now, with the sun just a red sliver above the ridge, Caleb led the mare out through the stable gate and started the 10-mile ride toward McLean Ranch. He cinched the saddle, took a breath, and looked west. Rugged rock ridges cut into the sky, wind whipping at the canyon walls. The road ahead had no room for mistakes, no room for feelings. Either he made it on time, or he went hungry. But life has its own way of testing a man, to see if his heart has truly turned to stone. Because tonight, just a few miles ahead, a silver-haired woman stood alone by a roadside marker, and the wind kept blowing as if it had been waiting for someone to stop. The dirt road north of town curled around the sandy ridge, swallowed by wind and the grind of gravel under Caleb's horse. Sunset poured across the desert like molten iron cooling over the Flint Range, painting the back of the young cowboy and his pale brown mare in deep red. He leaned forward, urging the horse faster. If he made good time, he'd reach the McLean Ranch before dark. If not, he'd be sleeping under the open sky again. Wind sliced across his face, carrying the dry smell of hay and iron dust. The road was so empty, he could hear nothing but his own breathing and the saddle creaking beneath him. Then he saw her. A small figure stood at the bottom of the hill. A woman, silver hair tangled, long ash-gray coat drifting in the wind. She stood at a fork in the road, one path leading toward the Flint Hills, the other toward the dry riverbed. She wasn't moving. Her hand clutched a worn cloth bag, her back bent with age. The last light of dusk brushed across her face, revealing eyes unfocused, searching for a memory that no longer stayed. Caleb pulled the reins, frowning. No wagon, no family, just an old woman alone in the wind. He almost rode past. 1 second, 2, 3. Each hoofbeat grew heavier, like something was tugging him back. From behind him, her voice drifted through the wind, thin and shaking. I need to get to the school. The children are waiting. I have to read them their poem. Caleb stopped. He turned in the saddle. She was still there, turning in a small, confused circle, walking a few steps in the wrong direction, then freezing again. A passing wagon driver glanced her way and muttered, shrugging her off. She wanders, happens all the time. Her daughter's rich, lets the old lady roam. Another man added, voice laced with mockery. That's Mrs. Briggs, Highridge house. Caleb knew the name. The white mansion on the hill, the one folks called the Palace of Dry Willow. Its owner, Nora Kingsley Briggs, was respected and wealthy. Her mother, Eleanor, was frail and losing pieces of herself. Caleb looked at the fading sun. If he stopped now, darkness would swallow the Flint Pass, and McLean wouldn't pay a man who arrived late. $3, a week of meals, a warm place to sleep. All he had to do was leave her. But then Eleanor stumbled, almost falling into the gravel. Her bag spilled open, a handkerchief, a small notebook, and a silver locket. In the last streak of sunset, the locket flashed, sharp and desperate, like a signal flare. She bent down to gather her things, hands trembling. "I have to go home. My daughter's waiting. Which way is home? Over there or down there?" Caleb exhaled. He swung off the horse and approached slowly, speaking gently, as if to a frightened child. "Ma'am, where are you trying to go?" "That road leads to Flint Ridge. The other goes to the Dry River. Tell me where your home is, and I'll take you there." She looked up, eyes drifting. "Home? It has a long porch, lavender by the window. My daughter used to pick them, but she doesn't have time anymore." Her voice faded, then shifted, like her mind had changed tracks entirely. "My students. They're waiting. I used to teach at the little school on the hill. They were poor, but so bright." Caleb listened. The wind was getting colder. Shadows stretched across the road. She wasn't just lost. Her memory was leaving her piece by piece. He picked up the locket, brushed the dust away. Inside was the portrait of a younger woman, eyes fierce and determined. Beneath it were tiny engraved letters. Eleanor Briggs, Highridge House, east of Dry Willow. He let out a slow breath. Now he knew exactly where she belonged. Only one question remained. Did he have the courage to take her all the way there? To the west, the sun was gone. To the east, the cold wind rose. And between them, a poor young cowboy stood still, holding the locket of a lost woman. Listening to his heartbeat matched the rhythm of the wind. The heartbeat of a man whose heart had not yet turned to stone. Caleb stood still at the crossroads far longer than he meant to, the cold locket resting in his palm, the wind brushing past him like an impatient reminder. Ahead of him, the old woman fumbled with her cloth bag, confused and trembling. The last strip of daylight faded behind the ridge, a thin red slash across the sky. The wind shifted, sweeping down from Flint Pass, sharp and cold. He knew that if he mounted his horse and turned left, he would reach the McLean Ranch on time. 5 miles, 3 silver coins, a warm place to sleep. If he turned the other way, toward the canyon and the deepening night, he would gain nothing but the company of a lost old woman, darkness, and a road most people refused to ride after sundown. He watched Eleanor Briggs shuffle along the dirt edge of the trail, muttering to herself, "I have to teach the lesson again. The children must have forgotten everything." His chest tightened. Not pity, something warmer. Something he had not felt in a very long time. He tightened the saddle strap and walked toward her. "Ma'am, let me take you home. The road is too long to walk alone." She lifted her head, her eyes vague and far away. "Home? But I have to reach the school." "The school can wait," Caleb said softly. "Night won't." He helped her onto the mare's back. She startled at first, then gave a small, dreamy smile. "You are very kind. What was your name again?" "Caleb Ward, ma'am." "Ward," she repeated slowly. "I once had a student named Ward. Poor family. Beautiful handwriting. Perhaps you are his son." Caleb smiled and did not answer. He pulled the reins. The mare started forward, carrying 2 silhouettes into the blood red of the fading day. The trail through Flint Canyon was no place for gentle souls. Jagged rocks, steep inclines, wind screaming between the cliffs like an angry spirit. The moon had not yet risen. Their shadows stretched long and uncertain along the cracked earth. Caleb rode slowly, one hand on the reins and one arm behind Eleanor, steadying her. Every now and then, he felt her shoulder shiver, though he could not tell if it was from fear or cold. He shrugged off his worn coat and draped it around her. "Take this. Night wind is brutal here." Eleanor nodded and gave a faint smile. "You will catch a chill." "I'm used to the cold." The words came out easily, but inside him something twisted. Yes, he was used to cold, to hunger, to the kind of loneliness that could grind a man down to bone. Yet here, in the biting wind, he felt warm for the first time in years, because for once, someone needed him to stay. Halfway across the pass, they stopped by a narrow stream. Eleanor sank onto a flat rock and inhaled deeply. "This water smells like the creek behind my childhood home." Caleb handed her the water pouch and listened. "I washed slate boards here every morning. For my students, I taught reading, writing. I thought that if a child learned to read, they would learn to care." She looked at him suddenly, eyes clearing for a moment. "But perhaps that is not true." "Is it?" "Some forget," Caleb said gently. "Some just never had the chance to learn." She stared at him for a long time. Then, softly, "You speak like my husband. He used to say that learning to be decent is harder than learning to spell." The light faded again in her eyes. She looked down at her hands. "I do not know where he is now." Caleb turned his gaze toward the dark ridge. His mother's voice echoed inside him. "Do not let your heart turn to stone." He folded a blanket around Eleanor's shoulders and whispered, "Let's keep going. We are close." Night deepened. The wind grew stronger. The trail narrowed. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled. The mare hesitated, hooves shifting nervously. Eleanor clutched the saddle horn. "Someone is calling me. Do you hear it?" Caleb held the reins tightly. "It's just the wind, ma'am. No one is calling. Just a little farther." Dust stung their faces as they crossed the final bend. Then he saw it. The first birch tree, pale against the darkness. Beyond it, a glow of lamplight scattered on the hill. Highridge House, a white mansion on the slope, porch lights shining like a beacon through the night. Eleanor lifted her head. "There it is, my home. I told you. The lavender pots are right by the windowsill. My daughter loves lavender. She says the scent helps her remember." Her voice faded. Caleb swallowed. He realized that during the entire ride through the canyon, he wasn't just guiding an old woman home. He was guiding the better part of himself out of a place he never knew he'd been trapped in. The Highridge gates loomed tall, iron wrought with an engraved willow tree. Caleb knocked 3 times. The metallic echo spread through the still night. A servant appeared, lamplight lifting from his hand. The beam revealed 2 faces covered in dust, tired but peaceful. "Mrs. Eleanor, good heavens, where have you been?" The gates opened. Voices, footsteps, relief. "Miss Nora. She's back. Mrs. Eleanor is home." Caleb slid off the horse and helped Eleanor down. She held his hand and squeezed gently. "Thank you, Ward. You remind me so much of my student." Then her gaze drifted toward the house, swallowed by warm lights and familiar voices. Caleb stood there, shoulders heavy, yet his heart strangely light, as if some stone that had sat inside his chest for years had finally rolled off. Lavender pots lined the porch railing. Their scent filled the night air, soft and clean. He looked up and smiled. The dry willow wind still blew across the desert, but for Caleb Ward, it felt different, softer, because for the first time in his life, doing the right thing had cost him everything he had left of the night, and he was at peace with the loss. The iron gates of Highridge opened and torchlight flared like fire waking in the dark. Servants rushed down the steps, their voices overlapping, skirts sweeping through lamplight. "Mrs. Eleanor, good heavens, where have you been since noon?" "Hurry, someone get Miss Nora!" Caleb stepped back slightly, his hand still supporting Eleanor's frail arm. The head butler, a thin man with silver hair and a spine stiff as a rifle barrel, looked Caleb up and down. Dust coated Caleb's jacket, sweat streaked across his cheek, and his coat was still wrapped around Eleanor's shoulders. "And you are?" His voice was low and guarded. Caleb swallowed, his voice rough from the long ride. "I just brought her home. She was lost near Flint Canyon." Before the butler could speak again, a woman's voice echoed from the porch. "Mother." Footsteps hit the wooden stairs fast and hard. A young woman appeared, Nora Kingsley, in a charcoal gray dress, hair pinned tightly, dark eyes clear and sharp, like polished glass. The lamplight caught her face, revealing exhaustion beneath a practiced elegance. But the moment Nora saw her mother, all that steel melted. She dropped to her knees and grabbed Eleanor's hands. "God, you scared me half to death. Do you have any idea how many people I sent looking for you?" Eleanor squinted, her gaze drifting, then smiled faintly. "Miss Kingsley, you didn't turn in your assignment yesterday." Silence fell across the courtyard. Servants lowered their heads. No one dared breathe. Nora closed her eyes for a moment. She knew, yet again, her mother did not recognize her. Caleb stood still, a knot tightening in his chest. He had never seen someone powerful look so suddenly small. After a long moment, Nora rose and turned to him. Her voice steadied, quiet but composed. "You said you found her where?" "Outside town, at the crossroads before Flint Pass. It was almost dark and she was alone. I just brought her home." Nora studied him carefully, assessing everything, from the torn calluses on his hands to the dried blood on his sleeve. Her gaze eased. "You crossed Flint Canyon, alone. It was me and the horse. Do you have any idea how dangerous that road is at night?" "Yes," Caleb answered softly. "But she couldn't stay out there." Nora exhaled, a breath that sounded like surrender. "You saved her. I don't know how to thank you." She motioned to a maid. "Martha, take my mother inside. Warm water, and light the stove." As they led Eleanor away, Caleb remained where he stood, hat in hand, unsure if he should leave or wait. He wasn't used to being invited to stay. He was used to disappearing. Nora turned back to him. This time her voice was gentler. "You can come inside. Let me have someone tend to your injuries." Caleb shook his head and offered a tired half smile. "That won't be necessary. I didn't do anything special. I should get back to the ranch before sunrise." "What ranch?" "Silas Boone's, down at the base of the ridge. That's miles from here. Riding back now is dangerous. I'm used to the night, and no one's waiting for me anyway." A simple sentence, flat, honest, heavy with a loneliness he didn't know he'd revealed. Nora paused. She reached into her skirt pocket and pulled out folded bills. "Then at least take this, for what you did." Caleb stared at the money, It could pay off his debt at the boarding house, buy new boots, maybe even let him leave this dusty town for good. But his hands stayed at his sides. "Honey, I didn't do it for money, Miss Nora. I just thought, if she were my mother, I'd hope someone would stop." His voice was hoarse but true. Nora looked at him as if seeing something rare, something she hadn't seen in a long time in a world run by status and profit. She finally gave a small nod. "Then at least tell me your name, properly." "Caleb. Caleb Ward." "I'll remember it." He dipped his head, placed his hat back on, and walked down the dirt road. His silhouette grew smaller and smaller until the night swallowed him completely. Only the scent of lavender on the wind followed him, as if the house itself was seeing him off. On the porch, Nora stood for a long time, watching the darkness where he disappeared. Her mother was already asleep inside, safe. The night breeze fluttered the curtains and carried a trace of desert dust from the road he just traveled. Softly, almost as if confessing to herself, she murmured, "Sometimes, perhaps God doesn't send angels with wings. He sends someone who knows how to stop." Night had fully settled by the time Caleb left Highridge House. The lights from the mansion still glowed, but that brightness never reached the bottom of the hill. Down here, there was only a strip of dirt road stretching into darkness and the heavy steps of a tired horse pushing through the cold wind. A thin crescent moon hung low, pale light sliding across Caleb's dust-covered shoulders. He pulled his collar up and exhaled a cloud of white breath into the freezing air. Behind him, wind hissed through the birch trees, like someone calling his name. Maybe Eleanor, maybe his mother, or maybe just the imagination of a man who'd gone too long without a place to return to. In the West, people said there were only two kinds of drifters, those who were searching and those who were running. Caleb had never known which one he was. When the first lanterns of Dry Willow appeared, something in his chest sank. The town slept under a sheet of gray dust. Only wind stirred the hanging signs, and a single lantern flickered weakly above the saloon door. Caleb stopped in front of Silas Boone's stables where he worked. The gate was locked. A dim lamp burned by the barn door. On the upstairs hatch, he saw a scrap of paper scrawled with charcoal. "Ward, you're past deadline. Horse not delivered, customer left. We don't keep men who can't keep their word. S.B." Next to it lay his rolled bedding, tossed onto the dirt, soaked with dew. Caleb stood still, not surprised, just cold. The cold didn't come from the wind. It came from the place inside him that had still hoped someone would understand. He knocked once, then twice. No answer. Only the soft breathing of horses behind the wall and the loose metal hinge tapping in the wind like laughter. He turned away. No anger, no bitterness, just emptiness. He led the mare to the end of the street, slipped off her reins, and stroked her neck gently. "Go on. There's nothing for you here." The horse lowered her head, snorted softly, and walked into the darkness. Caleb stood there for another moment, hand still suspended in the air, as if clinging to the last bit of warmth left in his day. He walked through the town, past the shuttered general store, past the little church, where a sign still swung on rusty hooks. Sunday sermon, why people don't stop. Caleb gave a faint, tired smile. No bitterness, no sweetness, just a quiet laugh at himself. Behind the general store was an old awning, where drunkards or runaways sometimes slept. He went there. Crates were stacked high enough to block most of the wind. He spread out his damp blanket, leaned against the wall, and pulled his hat low over his face. Wind sliced through the gaps in the boards, scattering red dust across his boots. Somewhere far off, the church bell rang once, long and lonely. Caleb closed his eyes. His breathing slowed, steady. Halfway between wake and sleep, memories rose like floodwater. He was 12 again, standing outside their small home, listening to his mother cough through the door. He saw his father tighten his saddle, turn away and say, "When the rainy season ends, I'll be back." But the rain never ended. He saw Eleanor sitting by the stream, voice trembling. Yeah, if you know how to read, you know how to care about people. And Caleb, who couldn't read much of anything beyond the worn-down tracks of his own life, had somehow been the only one who stopped to walk her home. Night deepened. The dirt beneath him was cold and hard, yet something inside him felt warm. Maybe his mother would have smiled if she saw him tonight. Maybe somewhere on that hill, Eleanor was asleep in a warm bed, unafraid, no longer lost. With that thought, Caleb whispered to himself, "At least tonight, someone got to go home." His eyes closed. Sleep came slowly, shallow but peaceful. The wind still moved through Dry Willow, but this time it felt gentle, like the breath of a mother soothing her child to sleep. Caleb woke to sunlight slicing through the gaps in the wooden planks. Morning in Dry Willow was never gentle. It stabbed straight into your eyes and dragged you back into whatever reality you'd been trying to escape. He stayed still for a moment, his back aching from the hard floor. Dust, dry grass, and rusted metal mingled in the air. Somewhere nearby, a stray cat hissed and darted between stacked crates. The world kept spinning, whether he was in it or thrown to the side of it. He sat up, brushed the dirt off his shirt, rolled up his damp blanket. Outside, the town shimmered under a coat of pale gold. The saloon lantern was still lit, the bakery's oven already smoking, and women walked by with baskets of vegetables, none of them looking his way. Fine. When people don't see you, you're free. He planned to look for work, maybe down at the lumber yard, maybe hauling freight at the river docks. As he stepped out from under the awning, the sound of iron wheels grinding over dirt echoed from the end of the street. A black carriage rolled into Dry Willow. Tall wheels, polished panels reflecting sunlight, 2 white horses pulling it through a cloud of dust. The driver wore a dark coat. A silver plaque on the side read, "Highridge Estate Heads Turned." Carriages like that didn't come here, unless something significant was happening. Caleb stayed in the shade, watching. The carriage stopped in front of Silas Boone's stable. A woman stepped down. Martha, the Highridge housekeeper. Upright posture, sharp eyes, the air of someone used to being obeyed. Silas came out, pale, holding a bucket of water. Martha inclined her head and spoke, calm and precise. "I'm looking for a man named Caleb Ward. He worked here." Silas grunted. "Did. Had to fire him last night. Didn't deliver a horse, lost the client, lost the contract." "Where is he?" "No idea. Slept somewhere in town, I guess. Or left." Martha's voice softened, though her words did not. "My mistress wants to speak with him. This morning." The townsfolk froze. A blacksmith nudged his friend and snorted. "That broke kid? The Highridge lady wants him?" Martha ignored the murmurs. Her gaze swept to the street, then stopped. Caleb stood half-hidden behind a stack of crates, hat in hand, sunburnt and dusty. She walked straight toward him. "Mr. Ward?" Caleb nodded, voice rough. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Martha, housekeeper at Highridge. Miss Nora asked me to find you. She'd like to speak with you." He instinctively stepped back, the natural reflex of a poor man who's been ordered around his whole life. I don't think she needs anything from me. I just walked her mother home." Martha held his gaze. There was no judgment in her eyes, only certainty. She said it isn't about needing anything. It's about wanting to thank you and to ask a favor. Silence dropped over the street. Silas scratched his head, awkward. "Ward, if they came for something good, go. Forget last night." Caleb pressed his lips together. Part of him wanted to refuse. Everything the wealthy touch comes with strings. But Martha wasn't lying. He could feel that. "All right," he said quietly. "If she really wants to talk, I'll go." Inside the carriage, the faint scent of lavender lingered, the same scent he'd smelled on the porch last night. Martha sat across from him, hands folded neatly, her eyes softening when she saw the cuts on his hands. The ride up Highridge was almost unreal. Morning light turned the grasslands gold. The wooden fencing gleamed like silver. The same road he'd traveled through darkness now revealed. Cactus blooming with purple flowers, sparrows looping over tall weeds, and far ahead, the white manor rising from the hill like a mirage on green water. Caleb stared through the window, stunned. Same path, different light. Sometimes the world doesn't change, only the way we see it. At the gate, the servants opened the carriage door and bowed. This place wasn't built for men like him, but today, it didn't make him feel small. Martha led him through a side entrance. No grand foyer, no parading him past guests. Instead, into a small, sunlit room with open windows and a view of the garden. On a chair by the window sat Mrs. Eleanor, wrapped in a wool blanket, smiling at a tiny bird perched on her hand. Her eyes were calm, clearer than last night, quietly present in a way that felt like a miracle. Caleb stopped at the threshold. Eleanor looked up and recognized him. "Mr. Ward, I made it home, didn't I?" "Yes, ma'am," Caleb answered softly. "Now you're home." A voice behind him. "Mr. Ward." He turned. Nora Kingsley stepped into the room, not in silk, not in evening attire, but in a simple white shirt and rolled sleeves. Her face looked rested, but her eyes still held the depth of someone who had spent the night thinking. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I owe you a conversation." Caleb lowered his gaze. He didn't know why he was here, but something inside him stirred. Not fear, not discomfort. The rare, unfamiliar feeling of being seen. Sunlight filtered through the willows, scattering pale gold across the floor. And Caleb knew then. His journey hadn't ended when he brought someone home. It was just beginning, right here, where a powerful woman was learning, perhaps for the first time in her life, what it meant to stop and look back. Sunlight spilled through the tall window, washing across the hand-woven rug and over Nora Kingsley's face. She didn't look like the cold, untouchable woman Caleb met the night before. There was softness in her eyes now, the kind that appears after someone has survived a long storm. She motioned toward a chair near the window. "Sit down, Mr. Ward." Caleb nodded, hesitated, then sat back straight, hands resting on his knees. He wasn't used to cushioned chairs or rooms scented with lavender oil. Outside in the garden, Mrs. Eleanor was walking slowly between lavender rows, guided gently by a maid. She hummed a tune with no melody left, just breath and memory. Watching her, Nora spoke quietly. "My mother doesn't get many clear days. Today might be a blessing from God, or from you." Caleb said nothing. He lowered his head, silent. "That they told me," Nora continued. "You took her through Flint Canyon at night, on one horse, and you didn't ask for anything. I keep wondering why." Caleb raised his eyes. They were tired, but steady. "I don't really know, ma'am. Maybe, I just didn't want to watch someone else get lost." "Lost?" "Yes. My mother died during a storm season. No one stopped. I thought, if there's ever another day when someone is standing alone on the road and I'm the one walking by, then I'll stop." Nora didn't reply. The room was so still he could hear the soft rustle of the curtains as the wind pushed against them. After a moment she smiled, sad but warm. "This world needs more people who stop." She stood and walked to her desk. From it, she picked up a sheet of paper stamped with the Highridge seal. Her handwriting was clean and decisive. "I have a proposal," she said. "My mother needs someone with her. Not a servant, a companion, someone patient, someone kind, someone unafraid of being alone. And I believe you're the only person I've met who has all three." Caleb blinked, thrown off balance. "You want me to work here?" "Yes, work, but not just that. I want you to stay at Highridge. Walk with her, listen to her stories, be with her on the days when her memories fade. The small house by the garden will be yours. It has a porch and an east-facing window. You'll be paid, not much, but enough. And more importantly, you'll have a place to come home to." The words hit him slowly. A place to come home to. He looked down at his hands, darkened by sun, cut from rope and reins. Those hands had only ever held work, weight, and silence. Now someone was placing trust in them. "Miss Nora," he said quietly, "I'm not educated. I don't speak pretty. I fix saddles. I shoe horses. I'm not sure I belong in a house like this." Nora's smile reached her eyes. "I don't need someone who knows fancy things, Ward. I need someone who remembers the one thing most people with money forget: how to stop." Outside, Mrs. Eleanor laughed, the sound light as a wind chime. Caleb turned to the garden. She waved at him with the shy delight of a child. Nora watched that, and her voice lowered. "I've tried to buy more time for her. Doctors, treatments, things worth more than gold. But maybe what she needed wasn't medicine. Maybe she just needed someone willing to sit beside her while her mind slips away." Caleb looked at Nora. For the first time, he didn't see power in her eyes. He saw exhaustion. He saw a daughter afraid of losing her mother piece by piece. "I'll stay," he said. Nora inhaled slowly. "You're sure?" "Yes, I have nothing left to lose. But this feels like something worth keeping." She reached into her pocket and placed a silver pocket watch on the table between them. "This belonged to my father. He used to say, 'Time only has value when you spend it with someone. If you're going to stay, take it, as a reminder that someone here will remember you.'" Caleb looked at the watch. Scratched metal, the faint tick of gears. A simple object. Yet to him it meant something he had never had before. Time that belonged to someone else, given to him freely. He picked it up carefully. "I'll take it, Miss Nora, but I think you've already given me something more valuable." "What's that?" she whispered. "Trust." They both stood. Nora extended her hand, slim, pale, steady. Caleb reached out his, rough, calloused, sunburned, two worlds touching with nothing between them but truth. Outside, a breeze stirred the lavender beds, and Mrs. Eleanor looked toward the window, smiling at the sight of the two figures standing together. Caleb spoke softly, as if making a vow. "If your mother forgets the world, I'll remind her she was loved." Nora blinked hard, emotion catching in her voice. "And if one day you feel like leaving, remember, this door stays open." Caleb smiled. "I've never had anywhere to come back to, Miss Nora. Maybe now I do." The garden brightened under full sun. Golden dust shimmered in the air. The breeze brushed past them like a whispered blessing. Somewhere beyond the hills, the church bell rang. Not a lonely echo, but the beginning of a new day. Summer arrived early that year. The fields around Highridge House turned gold, and the lavender bloomed wide across the valley, carrying a scent light as breath and soft as memory. The wind in this part of the West wasn't harsh anymore. It carried only the steady rhythm of quiet things. Sparrows fluttering near the porch roof, horses shifting in the back stables, and the occasional warm laughter of an old woman with silver hair. Caleb Ward stayed. His days began before sunrise. He'd stir the morning fire, sweep the stone path, ready the wheelchair, and wait for Mrs. Eleanor to wake. In the mornings, they walked the garden paths. At noon, he helped the ranch hands in the stables or repaired broken fences. In the afternoons, he sat with her on the porch, reading aloud poems she once taught her students. Sometimes she stopped him, gently correcting his cadence or showing him where the emphasis should be, as if every word still mattered. One morning, as Caleb changed the water in the vase, Mrs. Eleanor studied him. "Mr. Ward, have we met before?" Caleb smiled. "Maybe on a dusty road somewhere." "Yes," she whispered thoughtfully. "You were the one who stopped, weren't you?" "I stopped. This world, not many people stop. Remember that." She forgot the conversation moments later, but he didn't. Those words settled into him like a prayer. Nora often watched them from her office window. In the mornings, she saw Caleb pushing the chair slowly down the stone path, the wind tugging at Eleanor's shawl while he laughed at something she said. In the afternoons, she saw them sitting under the roof's shade, Eleanor reciting poetry while Caleb listened with the intensity of a man hearing music from another lifetime. Gradually, Nora realized something. Highridge House no longer felt like a silent mansion of glass and rules. Since Caleb arrived, light had returned. Not the cold glint of chandeliers or morning sun, but a light made of presence. One late July afternoon, Nora walked to the stables. Caleb was repairing a saddle, sleeves rolled up, sweat on his brow, hands moving with a steady rhythm that suggested he was born to shapes of leather and rope. Seeing her, he stood straight and nodded. "Miss Nora." "I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to say thank you." "Thank you?" he echoed, surprised. "My mother sleeps through the night now. She doesn't wake up frightened or wander off. I believe part of that is because of you." Caleb wiped his hands on a cloth. "I didn't do anything special. I just stayed." Sometimes staying is the biggest thing a person can do. Days passed like that. Dawn after dawn, sunset after sunset. No big events, no sharp turns, just repetition. Soft and healing. For Caleb, it was the most precious thing he had ever known. He slowly learned to read, Eleanor insisted. She taught him simple verses, poems with short lines. Every word felt like dropping a stone into still water. "Read to understand the world," she told him. "But more importantly, read to understand people." He read slowly. He stumbled often. She never laughed. She only placed her hand over his and said, "No one starts perfect, Mr. Ward. Beginning is enough." Some evenings, he and Nora sat at the porch, watching lantern lights spill onto the yard. They rarely spoke. The quiet between them was gentle, rare. Two people who had spent most of life surviving noise now found safety in silence. Nora asked once, "Do you ever think about leaving?" He thought for a moment. "Maybe someday. Not because I want to, but because I must. And when that day comes, I'll be grateful I stayed." She smiled faintly. If everyone learned to be grateful for what they already have, the world might be calmer. Autumn came, the air thinned, leaves turned brittle, and Mrs. Eleanor began to weaken. Memory abandoned her piece by piece. Yet strangely, whenever Caleb sat beside her, she seemed clearer, anchored. One evening, as she drifted toward sleep, Nora whispered, "Do you know why she's peaceful with you?" "I don't." "Because you don't fear her confusion. You don't try to drag her back into reality. You walk with her into her memories." Caleb said nothing. He had never thought of it that way, but he knew it was true. He never corrected her, never forced her to remember. He simply stayed. Winter arrived quietly. The sky turned to polished silver. Frost touched the window panes, and each breath came out in small white clouds. Early one morning, Caleb was lighting the stove when Nora walked in. Her eyes were swollen, yet calm. "She's gone," she whispered. "My mother passed in her sleep. No fear, no wandering." Caleb stood still, not shocked, not broken, just deeply quiet, as if the wind inside him had stopped moving. Nora reached for his hand, trying to steady her voice. "You were with her at the end. I don't know how to thank you." He squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to. She wasn't alone. That's enough." The funeral was simple. No dramatic mourning. Only a violin playing low while the wind swept over the lavender fields. When the coffin lowered into the earth, Nora placed a small notebook inside it. The notebook Mrs. Eleanor used to teach Caleb how to read. He stood beside the grave, hat in hand, head bowed. Inside him, there wasn't sorrow. There was peace. Sometimes death isn't loss. Sometimes it is a return. Afterward, Highridge settled into a softer quiet. Nora returned to her work, but something in her had changed. A gentleness replaced the sharpness. And Caleb stayed. He tended the horses, he repaired fences, and he continued Eleanor's legacy without fanfare. He started teaching children from town to read. On the wooden door of the small shed they used as a school, Caleb carved rough words with his pocket knife. Sometimes stopping is the only way forward. Every evening, when the sun dropped behind the hills, people could see a tall man standing by the fence, holding a silver pocket watch, the one Nora had given him. He didn't check the time. He listened to it tick, a reminder that time is only real when shared with someone. And whenever the breeze swept across the lavender and brushed his face, he would close his eyes, smile quietly, and remember the words the old woman told him. You stopped. Because in a world full of people racing past one another, sometimes the bravest thing a heart can do is stay. The wind kept moving through the lavender fields, the same way it had moved for years. Only the people had changed. After Mrs. Eleanor passed, Highridge House stopped being a symbol of status and power. It slowly became a refuge. The heavy iron gate with the willow tree engraving no longer stayed closed. In its place, Nora asked Caleb to carve a simple wooden sign. His handwriting wasn't elegant, but the message was true. Highridge Haven, a place where anyone lost may stop and rest. News spread across Dry Willow faster than any rumor ever had. Orphans, jobless ranch hands, widowers, traveling workers with nowhere to go. Nora and Caleb welcomed them. Not out of pity, but so no one would have to eat alone, sleep outside, or be forgotten. Caleb taught the children to read every afternoon. His hands were rough and his writing slanted, but every letter carried warmth. He taught them the lines Mrs. Eleanor once taught him. Read to understand people, and sometimes stop before you walk too far. When he wrote on the chalkboard, the kids giggled at how crooked the letters looked. Nora, watching from the doorway, smiled too, because the crookedness made everything feel real. Over the years, Dry Willow transformed. Silas Boone's ranch, once cold and strict, now hung a sign on the barn door, partner of Highridge Haven. The small school near the hill expanded, built with repurposed wood from abandoned sheds. And the old saloon, the Red Lantern, became a rest stop where travelers could sleep, eat, or simply sit to warm their hands by a fire. Highridge funded the lamps that burned through the night. On late afternoons, when the sun poured over the hills like melted honey, people often saw Caleb sitting on the white fence, holding the silver pocket watch Nora gave him. He didn't check the time. He just listened. Next to him stood Nora, her hair now streaked with gray, but her eyes still the same as the morning she told him. "You only need to know how to stop, Ward." And now she knew how to stop too. One late autumn afternoon, wind swept harder than usual. Smoke from distant wood fires mixed with lavender on the breeze. Caleb was fixing a fence when Martha ran toward him, breathless. "Mr. Ward, someone is at the gate, looking for you." Caleb wiped his hands and walked to the entrance. A young man stood there, dust on his coat, hat in hand, eyes unsure. "Are you Caleb Ward?" "I am. I heard that once you brought an old woman home when she was lost. Today I found someone too. She didn't remember anything. I stopped, and I thought you should know." Caleb studied the boy carefully. He saw something familiar, the mixture of confusion, fear, and pride. The same look he carried the night he stopped on that dusty road years ago. Caleb smiled. The sun caught the faint lines around his eyes. "You did the right thing. You don't need me to know. Just remember how it felt. Keep that feeling. It'll take you farther than any road." The young man nodded, almost relieved, and walked away. Nora stepped beside Caleb and wrapped a coat around his shoulders. "You see, kindness spreads like wildfire. One person stops, then another." Caleb smiled, watching the young man fade into the gold dust of the road. "Like lavender," he said. "You plant one seed, and the wind carries it for miles." 10 years after Mrs. Eleanor's passing, Highridge held a small memorial for her. Everyone came: orphans, ranch hands, the local pastor, the blacksmith, the bakers, even Silas Boone with a cane. In the middle of the lavender field, Nora placed her mother's photograph on a table, beside the faded notebook Mrs. Eleanor used to teach Caleb to read. Caleb stepped forward and read aloud a poem, slowly, steadily, with a voice deep and warm. "Stop when the wind changes. Stop when someone is lost. Maybe God doesn't need us to go farther. Maybe He needs us to stop. Just long enough to save a wandering soul." Silence followed. Only the wind spoke, sweeping through the lavender and the chimes on the porch. That night, after everyone left, Caleb remained on the porch. Nora stepped outside with the old silver watch in her hand. "You know," she whispered, "this watch still runs, even though the gears are worn. Maybe because it's held by someone who knows the value of every second." Caleb looked at the watch, then at Nora. "Maybe I'm not keeping it," he said softly. maybe it's keeping me. Every time I hear it tick, I remember someone believed in me. And sometimes, faith is enough to hold a life together. A breeze brushed across them. Moonlight softened the lines on Nora's face. If Mother were here, Nora said, she'd call you her best student. Caleb chuckled. No, she taught me one word that took me a lifetime to understand. Which word? Stop. Night in the west spread its silver across the sky. The houses of Dry Willow glowed with warm lantern light. Soft banjo music curled in the air as horses settled in the barns. Highridge stood bright on the hill, a beacon for wanderers. Caleb walked to the fence, the watch in his hand, the wind in his hair. Somewhere on the old road, a horse galloped through the dark, hooves echoing like a heartbeat. Caleb closed his eyes and whispered into the wind, "If someone is lost tonight, let them find a person who knows how to stop." And the wind carried his words away, just as it once carried lavender, just as it carried kindness, just as it carried him. Because sometimes, the greatest journeys of a life begin with a single act of stopping. In the West, people say, when the wind blows long enough, every footprint fades. But some footprints don't fade at all. Some stay buried in the heart, so deep that even time can't erase them. Caleb Ward didn't build a church. He didn't write a law. He simply stopped on a dusty road and held the hand of someone who was lost. From that small act, an entire town learned how to stop and see one another. Nora learned how to care without controlling. Orphaned children found a place to belong, and Dry Willow, a place once known only for wind and dust, now keeps a lantern lit every night. For any soul who might be wandering in the dark. Somewhere out there, the roads are still long. People are still walking without knowing where they're headed. But if we're brave enough to stop, and kind enough to notice, maybe the world becomes just a little softer. If you believe kindness still has a place out there in the wind and the grit, if you've ever stopped, even once, to help someone who needed it, leave us a comment. Tell us your moment, because your story, even the smallest one, might be the light for someone else on their darkest stretch of road. My name is the Western Storyteller, and I believe there are still people like Caleb Ward out there, if you believe that too. Hit subscribe. Help us keep this lantern burning, so no one walks the long road alone.